Imagine, if you will, the suffocating depths of an Imperial Hive City. Here, amidst the relentless grinding of industry and the prayers of the desperate, millions of souls exist in a state of perpetual exhaustion. You are just one of them, a face in a sea of billions, unnoticed and unimportant. But as you navigate the soot-stained corridors, you begin to feel it, a subtle shift in the air, a gaze that lingers a fraction of a second too long. It is the feeling of being watched, not by the oppressive eye of the Inquisition, but by something far more intimate and far more patient. In the darkest corners of these urban canyons, a different kind of community is forming. You see them in the flickering light of the lower hab blocks, workers who share a quiet understanding, a warmth that seems entirely out of place in this cold, dying universe. They offer a hand when you stumble, a crust of bread when you are starving, and a promise of a future where the grinding gears of the Mechanicus finally stop. To the downtrodden, this isn't a threat, it is a miracle. It is the first taste of hope they have ever known. But look closer at your new friends if you dare. Notice the way their brows ridge just a bit too sharply, or how they never seem to blink in the harsh glare of the plasma vents. There is a stillness to them that feels fundamentally wrong, a physical dissonance that triggers a primal alarm deep within your midbrain. This is the uncanny valley of the soul. They look like you, they speak like you, and they claim to love you. But beneath the heavy industrial robes, the symmetry of their humanity is beginning to fail. You are witnessing the birth of a Genestealer cult, a biological cancer that does not just kill its host, but rewrites its very purpose. In the Imperium of man, where life is the cheapest currency, these cults offer the one thing the Emperor cannot: belonging. They are the enemy within, a shadow that grows longer and darker with every passing generation, waiting for the stars to align and the star children to finally arrive. By the time you realize the horror of what they truly are, it is already far too late for you and your world. The tragedy of a world's downfall begins not with an invasion, but with a single silent encounter in the dark. It starts with the arrival of a pure-strain Genestealer, a biological masterpiece of the Tyranid hive mind, designed for infiltration rather than open war. It does not come to kill you, it comes to change you. In the bowels of a cargo ship, or the forgotten sewers of a hive, it waits for its first victim. When that victim arrives, the Genestealer does not use its claws to rend flesh. Instead, it delivers what the lore chillingly refers to as the Patriarch's kiss. Through a specialized ovipositor, the creature injects a payload of mutagenic viral genetic material directly into the victim's bloodstream. This is the moment your humanity ends, though your body will tell you otherwise. The infection is insidious. It doesn't just rewrite your DNA, it hijacks your reproductive system and your very mind. You aren't a prisoner in your own body. Rather, your desires are subtly reshaped to align with the needs of the brood. You feel an overwhelming urge to protect the creature that violated you, viewing it not as a monster, but as a messiah. This genetic subversion is the ultimate violation of the self. From the moment of the kiss, your primary biological drive is no longer the survival of your species, but the propagation of the alien strain. You become the first acolyte, the patient zero of a spiritual and biological plague. You will return to your hab level, to your family and your workspace, carrying a secret that will eventually consume everything you hold dear. You are the bridge across which the great devourer will walk into the heart of the Imperium.
The horror lies in the fact that the victim feels no pain, only a strange, ecstatic sense of purpose. The Genestealer's psychic presence creates a soothing balm over the mind, dulling the natural instincts of revulsion. You will find a mate, you will have children, and you will believe with every fiber of your corrupted being that you are building a better world for them. You are a puppet dancing on threads of alien silver, and the one pulling the strings is a monstrosity of chitin and claw that you now call Father. The Genestealer Cult is a masterpiece of slow-burn horror, playing out not over days or months, but over centuries. It is a multi-generational project of biological camouflage. The first generation of offspring, the children of those who received the kiss, are the stuff of nightmares. Known as first-generation hybrids, they are hunched, multi-armed monstrosities with bulbous heads and needle-like teeth. They are kept hidden in the deepest vaults, away from the prying eyes of the enforcers, serving as the cult's muscle and its most feral protectors. However, as the generations progress, the alien strain begins to refine itself, slowly retreating beneath a mask of humanity. By the third and fourth generations, the hybrids, known as neophytes, can pass for human at a distance or in the dim light of the hive. This is where the uncanny valley effect becomes a strategic weapon. A neophyte might have a slightly oversized cranium, a patch of scales hidden under a collar, or an extra joint in their finger. But in the grime of a forge world, such mutations are often overlooked as mere industrial deformities or radiation sickness. These later generations are the most dangerous because they can infiltrate the very structures designed to protect the Imperium. They become your co-workers, your soldiers, and even your priests. They work harder, complain less, and show a level of devotion to their unions that puts the Imperial creed to shame. They are the perfect citizens of a totalitarian state, hiding a void where their soul should be. While the first generations provide the claws, these later generations provide the intelligence, the logistics, and the social access needed to rot the hive from within. The ultimate expression of this cycle is the Magus, a fourth-generation hybrid with immense psychic potential. Unlike the Patriarch, who is a creature of pure instinct and alien power, the Magus is the silver-tongued orator. They are the face of the cult, capable of swaying entire populations with a mixture of psychic suggestion and genuine charisma. They speak of liberation, of the four-armed emperor, and of a coming ascension that will wash away all suffering. They offer a false hope so potent that even the most cynical hive worker will lay down their life for it, never realizing they are merely fattening themselves for the slaughter. To understand the Genestealer Cult, you must understand the brood mind. In the cold, individualistic hell of an imperial hive, where every man is a rival for a scrap of food, the cult offers something seductive, the end of loneliness. When you join the inner circle, you are no longer just an isolated cog in a machine. You are linked. A psychic web anchored by the Patriarch begins to weave its way through your consciousness, connecting you to every brother and sister in the brood. It is a feeling of absolute belonging, a warm tide of shared purpose that washes away the fear of the dark. But this unity comes at a price that would horrify any free-thinking soul. As the brood mind strengthens, the you that once existed begins to dissolve. Your secrets are no longer your own. Your thoughts are echoes of the collective will. There is no dissent in the hive, for to disagree is to fight against your own nervous system. You become part of a biological consensus, a cell in a larger organism that prioritizes the survival of the group over the life of the individual. The peace you feel is not the peace of enlightenment, but the silence of the grave. The Patriarch sits at the center of this web like a bloated spider, its psychic gestalt acting as a lighthouse for its children. Through this link, the Patriarch can coordinate thousands of cultists with the precision of a master conductor. There is no need for shouted orders or vox comms when the revolution begins. Every cultist knows their role, every hand moves in perfect synchronicity, and every heart beats in time with the alien rhythm. This is the ultimate collectivism, a hive mind that treats human lives as disposable resources in a grander, hungrier design. Consider the horror of a mother who realizes her child is no longer truly hers, but a node for an alien intelligence. She sees the love in their eyes, but it is a love directed toward a monstrous shadow. This is the tragedy of the brood mind. It mimics the most sacred human bonds, family, faith, and loyalty, only to hollow them out and fill them with a cold, predatory intent. You are never truly alone again, but you are also never truly yourself. You have traded your soul for a seat at a table that is destined to be cleared.
The infection does not stop at the factory floor. The Genestealer Cult is a patient hunter, and it knows that to topple a world, it must first paralyze its brain. While the acolytes and neophytes toil in the depths, the cult's influence creeps upward into the spires of the nobility and the command centers of the planetary defense forces. This is the stage of the hidden rot. A mid-level administrator, a logistics officer, or even a member of a ruling great house might be a secret convert, their genetic deviance hidden behind expensive silks and high-born manners. Imagine the strategic nightmare this creates for the Imperium. When the time comes for the uprising, the planetary Vox array doesn't just fail, it is redirected to spread confusion. The orbital defense grids aren't destroyed, they are recalibrated to ignore incoming Tyranid bioships. The very infrastructure meant to protect the citizenry becomes a cage. This is not a war of conquest from the outside, it is a systemic organ failure. The world's defenses are not broken, they are simply handed over to the enemy by the very people trusted to man them. This subversion is slow and meticulous. A cult-aligned officer might spend decades subtly mismanaging supplies, ensuring that when the day of Ascension arrives, the loyalist guardsmen find their lasgun power packs are empty, or their heavy bolters are missing firing pins. They foster corruption, encourage dissent, and weaken the social fabric until the planet is a dry husk ready to be ignited. The cult doesn't need to defeat the Imperial Guard in a fair fight. They simply need to make sure the Guard cannot fight back when the knives are drawn in the dark. In the high society ballrooms of the Spire, the horror is even more refined. Here, the uncanny valley is masked by vanity. A noble might wear a high collar to hide a ridged neck, or heavy perfumes to mask a faint, musky alien scent. Their peers might notice a strange coldness in their eyes, or a disturbing intensity in their devotion to new religious movements. But in the decadent courts of the Imperium, such eccentricities are common. By the time the Inquisition suspects the rot in the aristocracy, the cult has already secured the keys to the planetary armory. For generations, the cult has whispered of the day of Ascension. To the downtrodden workers, this is the promised land, the moment when the Star Children will descend from the heavens to liberate them from the Emperor's tyranny. The atmosphere is one of religious ecstasy. When the signal is finally given, usually a psychic scream from the Patriarch that resonates through every infected soul, the world transforms in an instant. The quiet neighbor becomes a butcher. The loyal soldier turns his weapon on his commander. The streets of the Hive City run red as the hidden army emerges from the shadows. But the Ascension is a cruel joke,
a lie told to cattle. As the Tyranid hive fleet enters the system, the cultists look up at the sky with tears of joy, seeing the descending spores not as harbingers of doom, but as wings of angels. They have spent their lives preparing for this union, believing they will be elevated to a higher state of being. They fight with a suicidal bravery that baffles the remaining loyalist defenders, throwing themselves into the meat grinder of war because they believe their gods are watching. It is a spectacle of pure, unadulterated delusion. The reality of the Ascension is far more visceral. The Tyranids do not come to lead, they come to feed. The very creatures the cultists worshipped as saviors view them as nothing more than pre-processed biomass. The Patriarch, once the supreme leader of the brood, reverts to its primal role as a beacon for the hive mind. The psychic link that once provided a sense of unity now becomes a dinner bell. The cult has done the hard work of gathering the world's resources into neat, defensible piles, and now the great devourer has arrived to collect its prize. This is the peak of the tragedy. Imagine a fourth-generation neophyte standing on a pile of rubble, arms outstretched to welcome a descending carnifex, only to be crushed beneath its talons without a second thought. There is no reward for their centuries of loyalty. There is no place for them in the hive mind's perfect, silent future. They were a tool, a biological key used to unlock a door, and now that the door is open, the key is melted down for its raw materials. The hope they clung to was the very thing that ensured their extinction. The most horrifying moment in the life of a Genestealer cultist is not their death. Death, in the 41st millennium, is often a mercy. No, the true horror is the moment of realization. As the Tyranid bioships descend and the skies darken with spore clouds, the psychic brood mind that has held the cult together begins to fracture. The Patriarch, the father figure they loved more than life itself, suddenly severs the connection. The warmth of the shared consciousness evaporates in an instant, replaced by a cold, alien hunger that is deafening in its intensity. For the first time in generations, the cultists are truly alone. The veil of psychic delusion is ripped away. They look at their star gods and finally see them for what they truly are, monsters of chitin and bone, dripping with acidic slime. They look at their own hands, mutated and clawed, and see the deformities they once revered as blessings. The psychological trauma of this moment is shattering. It is a betrayal so absolute that many cultists simply collapse, their minds unable to reconcile the beautiful lie they live with the grotesque reality standing before them. But the Tyranids do not pause for irony. To the hive mind, the cultists are merely biomass that has pre-processed itself for easy consumption. The pure-strain Genestealers, who once fought alongside the hybrids as brothers, now turn upon them with predatory efficiency. There is no malice in this act, which makes it all the more terrifying. It is simply the harvesting of a crop. The hybrids are herded towards the digestion pools, alongside the loyalist defenders they just helped to slaughter. In the eyes of the great devourer, there is no distinction between a faithful servant and a defiant enemy. Both are just meat. Imagine the sheer despair of a magus, the charismatic leader who orchestrated the fall of their own world. Standing at the edge of a bubbling reclamation pool, watching their flock being dissolved into genetic slurry, they scream out to the Patriarch for salvation. But the Patriarch does not answer. It is already marching towards the reclamation pools itself, willingly offering its own biomass to the hive fleet now that its purpose is fulfilled. This is the sick joke of the Tyranids. The cultists aren't just traitors to humanity, they are traitors to their own survival instinct, tricked into digging their own graves with a smile on their faces. This final betrayal reveals the true nature of the Genestealer cult. It is not a faction, it is a biological weapon. The entire culture, religion, and society built by the cult over centuries was nothing more than a localized digestive enzyme, injected into the planet to soften it up before the main meal arrived. The tragedy is that their love, their devotion, and their sacrifice were real. They truly believed they were the heroes of the story. But in the grim darkness of the far future, faith without truth is just another way to die.
When the digestion is complete and the hive fleet moves on, leaving behind a barren, airless rock stripped of all life, a silent question remains. Why did they join? Why would a human being, possessing a soul and a will, turn against their own species for a monster? The answer is the most uncomfortable truth of all, one that the Inquisition strives to suppress. The Genestealer cults do not thrive because the Tyranids are master manipulators. They thrive because the Imperium is a nightmare to live in. For the average citizen in a hive city, life is a grinding, hopeless existence of 18-hour workdays, toxic food, and brutal enforcement. They are told the Emperor protects, but they see only starvation and disease. When a cultist approaches them, offering brotherhood, equality, and a purpose beyond being a cog in a machine, it is an offer that many cannot refuse. The cult succeeds because it addresses the fundamental human needs that the Imperium ignores: the need to be seen, to be valued, and to be part of a family. In this light, the Genestealer cult is a mirror held up to the Imperium's rotting face. It exposes the weakness of a regime built on fear and oppression. If the Imperium offered its citizens a life worth living, the false promises of the Star Children would find no fertile ground in which to take root. But because the Imperium demands everything and gives nothing, it creates the very vacuum that the Tyranids fill. Every cultist is a failure of the imperial state, a desperate soul grasping for a savior and finding a predator instead. So, as we look upon the scoured surface of a dead world, remember that the enemy within is not just the alien DNA hiding in the bloodline, it is the despair hiding in the heart. The Tyranids may be the ones who consume the flesh, but it was the cruelty of the Imperium that first hollowed out the spirit. In a galaxy of endless war, the greatest tragedy is not that humanity is being hunted by monsters, but that for so many, the monsters offered a kinder hand than their own kind ever did. The reality of the Genestealer cults is a reminder that in the 41st millennium, the most dangerous weapon is not a bolter or a chainsword, but hope. It is a weapon that can topple planetary governors and bring entire systems to their knees, all without firing a shot until it is too late. If you have survived this decoding of the alien threat, you now carry the burden of knowledge. But knowing the enemy is only half the battle. To understand the full scale of the horrors that await in the dark, you must be prepared to look where others look away. Subscribe to Silent Imperium. Join us as we continue to peel back the layers of propaganda and reveal the grim truth of the galaxy. The Star Children are not coming to save you. No one is. I will see you in the next file.